When you're looking for a recommendation, do you just flip open to a random page in the phone book, or I guess today, whatever the first recommendation from ChatGPT is? Or do you ask a friend, a confidant, someone whose opinion you trust? You're going to ask the opinion of someone you trust, right? Which is why host read ads on podcasts work so well. Host read ads communicate authenticity, and people who listen to podcasts trust the host. While most people think a host read ad is just reading a script, those people are just missing the entire point. And so today I'm going to show you how to turn authentic product recommendations into real revenue without alienating your audience. You're going to leverage the trust that you've built into recommendations for products that will actually serve your audience. Hey, everybody, my name's Joe Casabona. I'm the evangelist here at RSS.com, and our goal is to help as many podcasters as possible grow and monetize their podcast. And today I'm going to show you a great way you can do that through host read ads. So first, let's actually get into what is a host read ad. Okay, so a host read ad is an authentic product recommendation read by the podcast host. So if you are the host, you need to actually do the read. It's going to be a personal endorsement integrated naturally into the episodes, which is different from the pre recorded sponsor messages. And this is built on trust between a host and an audience. So you, as the host, you're going to read the ad, you're going to write the copy, you're going to talk about how important this product or service is to you, because this is the most important thing. It's not just some random voice telling you about a product. You are telling your audience how this product has helped you. And now I will say here that there are varying statistics on the efficacy of host read ads, but some say that they work up to 60% better than traditional ads or ads that are not read by the host. And it makes sense, right? Someone you trust is telling you about a product, and they're doing it hopefully in a natural way. So why why do these work so well besides the fact that you trust the person who's telling you about the product? Well, again, your audience already trusts you. There's a personal connection here, that the parasocial relationship between a podcast host and the audience is strong. The audience feels like they know you and they understand you because you are open and honest and authentic with them on your show, and that's going to drive action. It also feels more natural, right? It feels more like advice than an advertisement. You understand your audience better than anybody, and you are making this recommendation because you know it's going to help them. And like I said, some say that they convert, again, 60% better or 2 to 3 times better than traditional ads. So there are a few podcasts and podcast networks that I think do this really well. Relay over at relay.fm is one of them. Particularly the Pen Addict, I think, does a really good job. There's really good banter between the two co-hosts over the ad, and one will do like the traditional talking points, and then the other will usually talk about how they are using the product or how the product has changed the way that they work, which is that's really the key here, right? Is that it's not just, hey, buy our car or drink Coca-Cola. It's, hey, I'm recommending this product because I use it and it's great. And I think it'll be great for you too. Some bigger podcasts, I think, do this really well. How We Made Your Mother does a pretty good job of this. It's like really clear that it's kind of like a scripted thing, but it does feel more natural. And the Lonely Island Seth Meyers podcast, because that show is just chaos in general, and like even the ad reads are a little bit chaotic. So even though it's clear that they're reading an ad, which we'll talk about later, I think they do a really good job of integrating it and recommending it. And all of these ads generally follow the same kind of formula here. So here's the formula that I think would do really well for you to do a well done host read ad. First, there's the personal story, right? You want to share your actual experience. Then you want to identify a problem. What pain point does the product solve? You want to present a solution, which is how the product or service is going to help with this problem that you've identified. You want to talk about specific benefits, so real results, not just features. And again, maybe how it's changed you, tie it back to the personal story. And then you want to have a natural call to action. And we'll spend time later talking about what makes a good call to action. But here's an ad read that I will do, that something that could fit into my podcast. This isn't for a real product or anything. It's for a class of product, but it's not for a real product. So let me do this ad read for you. This episode is brought to you by Screen Blocker. Let me tell you, recently my wife and I took our 3 kids to Disney World, and we had a really strict no screen policy while we were in the parks. We were paying all this money to be in this amazing place, and the last thing we wanted to do was be consumed or distracted by our screens. Now, that was easy enough because we just didn't let our kids take their iPads or devices into the parks with them, but my wife and I still needed our phones. So how would we solve this problem? Yes, we could turn on screen time and we could block apps or just decide kind of not to open apps. But when you're standing in line waiting a long time for a ride, it could be really easy to pull out your phone and open the app, which is why I want to tell you about Screen Blocker. Screen Blocker is a physical device that you have to scan your phone to that will lock you out of certain apps, and you can decide what apps you want to be blocked out of. So you can keep phone and messages and the Disney World app, but you can block Facebook and Instagram and your email app. And the best part about Screen Blocker is that you can lock yourself out at any time with the push of a button in the app, but to get back in, to re-access what you've blocked, you have to physically scan a device, which means that even if my wife wanted to check Instagram or I wanted to check my work email, I couldn't. We couldn't because the physical device was back in our hotel room. So if you want to spend less time on your phone and more time in the real world, living life, spending those precious moments with your family, you need to check out Screen Blocker. You can head over to casabona.org/no screen to get a special discount on the Screen Blocker device. That's casabona.org/no screen. Thanks so much to Screen Blocker for sponsoring my podcast. So you can see there that I started with a personal story. I talked about the solution that this fake company Screen Blocker offers. And then I said, if you feel this way, if you want these results, check it out. And notice that I used my actual URL with an easy to speak URL. Again, we'll talk about the call to action later, but the call to action needs to be clear and easy. Okay, so let's talk about best practices here. I say here only promote products that you actually use. It should really be products that you have used before, right? You want to speak intelligently to them. They should be products that you believe in and that you trust, right? A few months ago, news broke that all of these YouTube creators were promoting Honey, and Honey was really taking money from creators, and they were doing some shady things behind the scenes. And so it's likely that some of these people truly believed in Honey and didn't know this, but it's likely that Honey just came with a giant check to a lot of creators. And so they decided to talk about them sight unseen, just they had a good promo and they offered the right price. So you want to make sure, because your audience trusts you, that it is a good product, that you can believe in it, and that it's a good fit for your audience. That is number one, because degradation in the trust between your audience and you is an absolute show killer. You also want to make sure to keep it conversational and natural, right? Notice in my example, I didn't say this episode is brought to you by Screen Blocker. Have you been on your phone too much? Do you want to be on your phone less? No, I told a real story. That was a real story. I did take my kids to Disney World a few weeks ago, and we did use our phone less. And I did use a product similar to the thing I described. So you want to keep it conversational and natural because you are making a recommendation to your audience. You want to place the ad strategically, right? So pre-roll usually gets skipped. There are even some apps now that will just automatically skip the first 2 minutes of a podcast. Post-roll, people are gone. So mid-roll works best. You want to find a good break in the conversation too, right? There are some things that I've experimented with as a podcaster is doing it baked in, right? Where I just, in the middle of a conversation, I did the ad read. And then there are times when I pre recorded it. It was still a natural host read ad, but I dropped it in the middle of a segment. And you know what? The ones that were actually baked in, just read in the middle of the conversation, did a lot better because they felt natural and they were placed strategically, and I didn't do it in some weird break where I could fit the ad in. So you want to make sure to place it strategically, and doing it while you're actually recording the episode. There's a big benefit to that. The drawback is you do need to plan it because you want to read it while you're recording. Whereas if you're going to drop it in later, you can drop it in basically at any point, at least up until you publish the episode. But placing it strategically will go a long way in conversion. You also want to limit the frequency. I write 1 to 2 per episode max. The general convention I have is 1 per every 10 minutes, right? So if you have a 20-minute episode, 1 to 2 max. If you have an hour and a half long episode, 4 or 5 is fine, right? You don't want to make it sound like the show is mostly ad, right? I've listened to podcasts where it's a 5-minute show and half of it was an ad. I stopped listening to that show. If you're going to talk more about the product than the actual content I'm here to hear, that's not great. And so you do want to limit the frequency, 1 to 2 max. I've had 3 in my hour-long episodes. You want to find the right balance. You don't want it to sound scripted or salesy. We talked about that already, right? When you're reading something, it's hard to not put on an I'm reading voice, but you want to sound natural, which is why you integrate the personal stories. If you're doing a paid sponsorship, yes, brands are going to want to have specific talking points, but if you can integrate them into your personal story, that's going to sound a lot more natural. And then, similar to the limit frequency, don't oversaturate your show. There are some podcast networks that just 3-minute long ads every 7 to 10 minutes. And that is a lot. You don't want your audience to feel like you're only putting out this content to make money. And when you have way too many ads, that's exactly what's going to happen. That's kind of the best practices. I'll also say when you're trying to figure out what to say, some people can't speak off the cuff. And I get that, especially when you're trying to remember everything. I would try to avoid fully scripting a host read ad. Some people can do it really well. I can't. It definitely sounds like I'm reading when I'm reading. Some people can read and make it not sound like they're reading. I'll usually have an outline, right? I'll try to have an outline of the talking points I want to hit and the story I want to tell. But if I do have this episode is brought to you by blah, blah. Have you ever had this problem that blah, blah solves? Well, blah, blah solves it, right? That sounds too much like an ad. Whereas, again, if you look at something like the Lonely Island and Seth Meyers podcast, it's usually that you can tell the guys are hitting the talking points, but they're also just kind of casually talking about the product. It doesn't feel scripted. And of course, you really want to, if you're going to script anything, I would say script the call to action because you really want to nail that. So here's what I recommend. Make it easy. You want to have an easy URL. Casabona.org/RSS. My podcast is called The Streamlined Solopreneur. It is streamlined.fm. And so all of my sponsor or host read ads have a URL. It is streamlined.fm/whatever because everyone is familiar with that URL. So you want to make it easy to speak on the show for people who are listening. You also want to make sure that you put it in the show notes on your website. And if you do a blog post, include it in the blog post as well. You want to make it as easy as possible for people to find it. So make sure to use that effective language. I'll usually say something like, to learn more, you can go to casabona.org/RSS. I also have a link in the show notes. You'll find the discount code there. Thanks so much to Screenblocker for partnering with me, right? But that effective language is, here's the URL, By the way, if you're not going to remember this because you're in the car or something, it's also in the show notes. So be sure to check it out there. And similarly, you want to have multiple touch points, right? You want to mention it verbally, usually a couple times. I will say, head over to casabona.org/RSS or casabona.org/no screen to learn more. Again, that URL is casabona.org/NOSCREEN to learn more. And then have it in the show notes. I'll usually put host-read ad links or sponsored links after the main description before the rest of the show notes. I'll also put the logo on my website. So I'll include an image on my website of the sponsor's logo or a link and just make it really clear, make it easy as possible for your listeners to take that action. Because ultimately, you don't know how your audience is going to consume your content, and you want to make sure that no matter how they're doing it, they convert. Whether it's a sponsor and you want you want as many people to convert for your sponsorship as possible, or if it is for an affiliate program and you get that commission, right? You want to drive as many people as possible and make it as easy for them as possible. Now, the last thing I'll say here, I alluded to this, but you have to disclose, right? At least in the United States, you are required to disclose when you are getting paid for mentioning a brand or a company, or if you are getting an affiliate kickback or a commission for the link. So I will always start with this episode is sponsored by, or if it is for an affiliate program, I'll include, go to casabona.org/RSS. I am an affiliate for RSS.com and I may get a commission if you use my link. That won't affect the price for you at all. I have had sponsors tell me, which means that they don't want me to disclose during the ad read that it is an ad. They don't want any background music behind it, because that's something else people will do. They'll have a little chime before a sponsor read, or they'll have music in the background to make it clear that it is an ad if the brand doesn't want them to say it's an ad. But you need to, I've always said no, I have to disclose at some point. And so if they really don't want me to say it during the ad, I'll say at the top of the show, right? Today's episode is brought to you by Screen Blocker. You'll learn more about them later in the show, right? And then at the end of the show, I'll say thanks so much to or I'll say at the end of the ad, thanks so much to Screen Blocker for partnering with me on this episode. So you want to make sure that you disclose, because again, first of all, it's about trust, but there's also a legal requirement. So disclose it, be clear. The audience should know it's a paid relationship. Stay honest, right? Only promote what you generally recommend. You can, especially if you are talking about similar products over the course of a year, you really want to avoid language like, this one is the best one, right? Because if you say, oh, product A is the best, and then 6 months later, product B is the best, and they're similar products, the audience will remember that. Your audience will remember that, and they'll wonder if you're just saying they're the best because you got paid to say they're the best. So you always want to avoid stuff unless there is one best, right? But if you're going to say something's the best, it better be, in your eyes, the best. So, you could always say it's the best for these purposes, or if you are a this, then these are the best, right? But you want to avoid like absolute statements like that. And then finally, if you're not sure, over disclose. Your audience will appreciate it, right? I mean, there are people who just don't like ads and people who will skip ads, but ultimately, most listeners know that podcasters need to support their work somehow, and you are a trustworthy source. And if you are honest with them, then they will trust you even more, because people like getting recommendations. It's not like people don't like getting recommended stuff. They don't like gratuitous ads, or they don't like ads for the sake of ads. And so doing a host read ad combines your ability to monetize your show with the fact that your audience trusts you and you want to recommend to them things that will honestly be good for them. All right, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about host-read ads, leave them in the comments below. If you want to join the RSS.com affiliate program, if you're not already part of it, you can go to rss.com/affiliates. My name's Joe Casabona. I'm the evangelist here at rss.com. Our goal is to help as many podcasters as possible launch, grow, and monetize their show. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you out there.